Okay, hello and welcome back for the Meet Roy. This is the arm assembly videos. This first piece will be assembling the wrist to the hand. So we're going to go ahead and get together where we are so far. So at this point you should have your Roy hand assembled to this position. Basically everything finished from this wrist clevis up. If you're not at that point, go ahead and jump back to the previous videos and get those finished up. So our hand, and in the kit should have been this long bag here. This contains most of the parts to finish up our arm assembly and our base. Now if you just are building an arm kit, you won't have this lower section, which are the base parts. You'll just have these parts in here. So this first step we're going to do, we're going to concentrate on building the wrist cross, which are these little pieces right here. And so we'll go ahead and just pull out these pieces here. So I'm just going to cut this along here and dump out those pieces. And then our servo leads, these will come in the next step a little later, so we'll set those aside. And right now we're just concentrating on these 6 pieces that make up our little wrist cross section. So set this aside. And so this is our last glued assembly in the robot. Once these pieces are glued up, the rest of the build is all screwed together and we won't be gluing anymore. So the typical, we're going to sand these parts out real quick. Okay, so these parts are ready to go. What we're going to need for this assembly is, there is a previous from the palm assembly. You'll remember we're going to have some leftover parts. What you're looking for is these two, this long post and the screw. Those are going to be part of assembling this next section. So get those guys out. And what I like to do before I actually assemble this is I just like to make sure that this shaft goes through these holes easily, so I'm not fighting it later on when I go to put the whole thing together. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and start with this part. And the way this works is we take the part with the little wings and we take the part with the little tab, and basically these tabs just slide on and we'll push down until they're flush on the tip. And what that's doing is that's creating this little cross which becomes our pivot for our wrist. So we want to do that for both sides. Press them in there, about like that. And so once those parts are on, then you can take this last part, which looks the same missing the wings, and it just kind of slips right down in there on top of those tabs you just created. And you just kind of flex everything into place, and it snaps together like so. Once those 4 parts are together, now we just have these little secondary braces that just kind of hold everything in place, and they go on the 2 leftover slots. And same thing, just kind of push them in there. And in there. All right. So once we have those parts all assembled, I like to push them all together first and give it a good squeeze, make sure everything is where I want it, and then we'll go ahead and glue it up. So a little bit different bottle of super glue here. I use this stuff pretty quickly around here, so just depending on what we have. Put on the little spout on this one. Hopefully it's going to work. I didn't look at it yet. Let's see, check that. Yeah. Okay, so on this one we're just going to lay some glue. I like to lay it right down in here on this position where these pieces come together, simply to make sure that we get a good connection there. And then go ahead and run some in on these spots on the face. All right. Okay. Okay, we're going to kind of let that sit for a minute. Set our super glue aside. We're not going to be needing that anymore. Okay, well, while we let this guy dry, we can go ahead and work on some of the parts from a little later in the kit. So we're going to go ahead and get our bag back out. Now this is our hardware kit here. We'll pull that out of our bag and set it right there. And then, like I said, this section here is all the parts for the arm. Okay, so those are all our parts for the arm. So what I think we'll work on right now is, I'm going to go ahead and set these parts aside. And these parts aside for a second. And what I want to show you is, we're going to go ahead and assemble these little rods. This will take a minute, and while that dries, we can get these done. So what we have here, basically, these are the all threads that make up the links for the wrist movement. And in order to make these a little prettier, we're going to take this vinyl tubing we have and slide it over the threads just to give us a better looking rod. What I have found is this can be a bit of a bear to get on there. So the trick I found is I just kind of start it on a little bit. And what we want to do is we're going to actually heat up this piece of tubing with a hairdryer. And so I've swiped my wife's hairdryer here. You don't want to get them too hot, but just a little bit of heat makes all the difference for sliding them on over this piece of all thread. Gonna need a little more. Oops, a little too far. Okay. And what you're trying to do is just get a little bit of thread sticking out each side. Once we got some threads, when we screw the ends on, we can center everything up. So that's that one. Go ahead and do the other one here. There we go. The hairdryer's not working too good, but there you go. That one slid on much easier. So that's what we're looking to do, is just cover those threaded rods, leave a little bit of threads out each side, and then when we screw the ends on, we'll set the length. Okay. Okay, so we will set those aside and use them later. Now we'll go back to the piece we were working on. All right. So our what we're calling the wrist cross has had a minute to dry. It dries pretty quick. What I like to do though is when I'm done, I like to go ahead and give these faces just one more quick sand, just to kind of smooth that out. And then I'll tend to try to sand this each side here. Maybe a little in the middle with the corner. Just kind of smoothing this out so that it's got, that's kind of our bearing surfaces that we rotate on. Okay, so that's it. That was our last glued piece. With that all done, we'll move on to assembling it into the hand. Okay, so here is our hand. Now, the trick that we're going for here is we have 6 servo wires hanging out the bottom of the hand currently. And if we look up in there, you'll see that 2 of them should be feeding from the pinky side of the hand, while 4 of them are feeding from the thumb side of the hand. So what you do is just kind of look in there and pick one of the 4 on the thumb side and just kind of flop it over to the pinky side. So we have 3 servo wires on the pinky side and 3 servo wires on the thumb side. And we're going to separate those out. Now, what we're going to do is if you look inside the cross here, you'll see you've got basically a cavity on one side and a cavity on the other side with these little vertical braces on each side. What we want to do is we want to pass 3 servo wires through one side and 3 servo wires through the other side. Now, when looking at this part, this is the orientation it goes in. So the crosses for the pivot are to the back and the wider hump is down. And so this is the order. So we'll start with this left side here. And what I tend to do is if you kind of hold the servo wires, you can see they're kind of in an order depending on how it all went together. I like to start with the outermost servo wire in and then feed the other ones in. And so basically what you're going to do is just going to take that, and it's a tight squeeze, but you can just feed it right down through that side of the cross. And then what you can do is you'll see there's a kind of a little round cutout in there. And what I tend to do is kind of tuck the servo wire into that cutout to give room for the next one. So I will go ahead and tuck all these wires real quick and we'll be back. I'll probably speed up the video so you don't have to watch me do this. I tend to get a little pair of these needle nose like I've always been using. They help me fight these plugs to the side I want to keep them on. Okay, so we fed the servo wires, you can see 3 on one side, 3 on the other side. So now what we need to do is we're just going to work those wires and kind of slide this cross up, and we're going to slide it right in between the clevis of the wrist. Now we want to take our long post and we bring it in from the back side of the hand. Now be sure as that post goes through that you keep 3 wires on one side of the post and 3 wires on the other side. You don't want your wire going around the post and then back. Make sure they're kept on both sides. And they tend to do that. And then we're just going to push that post right through. And then we're going to put in the screw. Now this one I go ahead and take my chances with the screwdriver if you're careful. And I kind of put my finger on the back and push real hard and give it a little bit of a tightening just to kind of keep it from unscrewing. And that makes basically our wrist pivot. So what that's going to do is this cross gives us our left and right pivot, and then these spuds will give us our front back pivot as we build it into the arm. And so that is our first of our arm assembly. So the next we're going to move on to is going to be the lower arm.